It's a state shaped by flatlands and forests, lakes and gravel roads, where daily routines often unwind without incident. But sometimes they don't, and instead end with mysteries that nobody has been able to solve no matter how hard they try. I'm Andrew. Welcome to Scary Mysteries, guys. Here are the 5 most dark and mysterious cases from Wisconsin. Number 5. The girl, the abandoned house, and the video.
A disturbing YouTube video could be the key to solving the disappearance of a Wisconsin teenager. Kayla Berg was 15 when she disappeared back in 2009.
It was late summer in Antigo, Wisconsin, when 17-year-old Kayla Berg stepped into a red Mitsubishi Eclipse and vanished. August 11th, 2009 was a normal Tuesday night in a small central Wisconsin town. Kayla had spent that evening with a friend hanging out, so nothing out of the ordinary. But where that night ended and why has never been fully explained. Kayla was born in March of '92. At the time of this incident, she just finished her junior year at Antigo High School and was living with her father after her parents' divorce. Kayla split her time generally between school, gymnastics, and late-night phone calls that stretched until the battery died. She wasn't the kind of kid who drifted far from her circle, but if she wasn't with friends, she was probably texting or talking to them. That summer, she'd been easing back into old routines, seeing some familiar faces and talking about jobs and plans after graduation. That night, she met up with an old friend, 24-year-old Miguel Marrero. According to him, they spent a few hours driving around, smoking some bud and catching up. Around 9 p.m., Kayla asked to be dropped off at another friend's house in Wysaw, an older, partially condemned home on McDonald Avenue. Marrero told police he did exactly that. Said he pulled up, she got out, and he drove away. But when investigators checked, the story didn't really fit. See, this house, it was totally empty. I mean, its doors were padlocked, windows boarded, no electricity, so nobody had been living there. Marrero later told detectives that Kayla said her friend hung out there sometimes, and he didn't really ask any questions. When Kayla didn't return home that night, her father assumed she stayed with friends. By the weekend, when no one had heard from her, her mother, Hope, filed a missing persons report. Antigo police began tracing Kayla's phone activity after that and checked her social media. But by then, everything had gone silent. Her phone did ping last in Wysaw around 9 p.m. on the night she disappeared, but there were no calls or texts and no digital trail after that. The police interviewed Marrero early on. His account never changed, and there was no evidence placing him anywhere else. He wasn't charged with anything because there was no sign anything had actually happened, just a young girl gone. But the strangeness of that location, the abandoned house, turned the case into something darker than a typical runaway file. And for years, the search spread across northern Wisconsin. Flyers, searches in wooded areas, interviews with former classmates, psychics, and even tipsters. But nothing led anywhere. Then, in 2016, a video appeared online. It was titled, "Hi Walter, I got a new girlfriend." In it showed a man excitedly talking to the camera about meeting a girl, then cutting to what looked like a basement where a frightened young woman sat in a corner crying. And the resemblance to Kayla, well, it was striking. The dark hair, the slight frame, and the fear. Within days, police departments across Wisconsin were fielding calls about it. The FBI became involved and the creators tracked down. The woman in the clip was eventually identified and proven to be unharmed, so this video, it was all for show. But the fact that people saw Kayla in that face said something about how deep the uncertainty had sunk. As of 2025, her case remains open. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children keeps her profile active. Over the years, there have been sporadic searches in remote areas, including around Burnham Wood and Wysaw, but none have turned up evidence. What happened to Kayla Berg is the kind of mystery that feels both ordinary and impossible at the same time. An everyday moment that just stops. One ride, one empty house, one video, and a silence that has now lasted more than 16 years. Number 4, The Photographer.
Today marks 20 years since Teresa Halbach's disappearance and murder. On Halloween 2005, the 25-year-old professional photographer had her last appointment at the Avery Salvage Yard in Manitowoc County.
This one all started as a routine photo assignment. October 31st, 2005, 25-year-old photographer Teresa Halbach drove her blue Toyota RAV4 along the back roads of Minnetonka County, Wisconsin, headed toward a rural property she'd visited before to do work. On this day, she was scheduled to photograph a van for sale to go into Auto Trader magazine. Teresa was young and looking to make a career out of doing what she loved. That's difficult, but she was organized, professional, and always on time. She lived near Green Bay, and so to make ends meet at the time, she spent her days crisscrossing the countryside, photographing vehicles of all kinds for listings. And that Halloween afternoon, she called her mother at around 2:30 p.m., finished her day's route, and after that, disappeared. And for 5 days, her family waited for contact that never came. When Teresa missed a planned visit and failed to return calls, her parents filed a missing person report on November 3rd. Search efforts quickly centered on her usual routes and, of course, the address from her Auto Trader work log. And one name in there stood out: Stephen Avery, the last client she was scheduled to visit. Avery was well known in Minnetonka County. In 1985, he'd been wrongfully convicted of assault and served 18 whole years before DNA evidence cleared him. After that, he filed a $36 million lawsuit against the county and several officials within it. When Halbach vanished after visiting his property, it was an uncomfortable coincidence. Here he was, forced to interact with the law once more, and many of them had a chip on their shoulder towards Avery. On November 5th, 2 volunteers searching Avery's salvage yard spotted Teresa's RAV4 hidden under brush and debris. The license plate had been removed and concealed nearby. A search warrant followed after that. Investigators then found her personal items, a cell phone, then her camera, and her car key, scattered or hidden on the property. Burned human bone fragments were then located in a fire pit behind Avery's trailer and in a nearby burn barrel. DNA tests later confirmed those remains were Teresa Halbach's. And so, Stephen Avery was arrested on November 9, 2005 and charged with her murder. Months later, his 16-year-old nephew, Brendan Dassey, was also arrested after a lengthy interrogation in which he gave a confession later described as coerced and inconsistent. Dassey said he and Avery assaulted and killed Teresa before burning her body. At trial, Avery maintained his innocence, insisting he'd been framed by local authorities seeking revenge for his earlier exoneration and pending lawsuit. The defense pointed to evidence handling errors, questionable chain of custody, and investigators from Manitowoc County participating despite conflicts of interest. The prosecution argued the evidence, the car, the key, the blood, it all told a clear story according to them. In March of 2007, both Avery and Dassey were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The Halbach family has never wavered in their belief that justice was served. But the public narrative fractured soon after. In 2015, the Netflix documentary, Making a Murderer, reignited the case worldwide. It cast doubt on nearly every aspect of the investigation, from interrogations to evidence recovery, and drew millions of viewers into a debate that still divides Wisconsin. Supporters call Avery and Dassey victims of systematic failure. Critics point to the physical evidence and jury findings as decisive. In 2019, Avery's attorney, Kathleen Zellner, filed extensive post-conviction motions, citing new forensic testing and witness statements, but as of 2025, no new trial has been granted. Both Avery and Dassey remain incarcerated, and most appeals have been denied. For investigators and family alike, what remains unshakable are the bare facts. Teresa left her home on Halloween of 2005 to take some photographs and never returned. Her car, her remains, and fragments of her daily life were found within 1 square mile of a single property, a place she'd been before, with a man who once stood as proof of injustice and is now seen by many as its author. Deals vanish, hype fades, but bad sleep, it hangs around like an unsolved mystery. That's why Ghostbed is worth looking into. We found it and still run by mattress-making experts with more than 20 years of experience. Ghostbed builds premium mattresses that are comfortable, durable, and most importantly, built to last. Every Ghostbed mattress includes proven cooling materials that regulate your temperature all night long, so you don't wake up sweating through another nightmare. And with their exclusive ProCore technology, you'll get targeted support through your hips and back to keep your spine aligned and your body feeling balanced. Ghostbed is family-run, not backed by investors or marketing hype. That means they can offer premium comfort at up to 50% less than comparable brands. No gimmicks, no middlemen, just real value. Each mattress comes with a 101-night sleep trial, a 20 to 25-year warranty, and fast free shipping. Most orders arrive in 2 to 5 days, so you could be sleeping better by next week. And right now, during Ghostbed's Black Friday sale, you can get 25% off site-wide, plus a free massaging neck pillow with your mattress purchase. Just go to ghostbed.com/scary and use promo code SCARY at checkout. That's ghostbed.com/scary, promo code SCARY. Upgrade your sleep with Ghostbed, the makers of the coolest beds in the world. Some exclusions apply. See site for details. Every single year I tell myself I'm going to be thoughtful with gifts, and then somewhere around the 22nd, I end up ordering some gift cards for someone, pretending that's what I meant to buy all along. Well, this year, I skipped the panic and went straight for something that actually feels like it came from me, an aura frame. And gift giving can be hard because those people closest to you, well, they're the ones you want to get right. That's why the aura frame works. You can fill it with the photos you know they'll smile at, old ones, new ones, all the little moments you forgot you even had on your phone. And the setup is simple. Unlimited free photos and videos. You just download the Aura app, connect the frame to Wi-Fi, and you can send anything to it with one tap. You can even personalize the gift before it arrives, so when they open the box, there's a message waiting for them. So if you're done pretending that last-minute panic is part of the tradition, this is the upgrade. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code SCARY at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code SCARY. Now, this deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout, and terms and conditions apply. 3. Chimney dough.
The skeleton found in a local store chimney in 1989 has been identified through modern DNA technology.
In September of 1989, a music store owner in downtown Madison unlocked his shop for the day. He was having a faulty boiler removed, so the contractor came in and got to work. It was a big job, and part of what needed to be done was remove part of the old chimney in the place. This was an old building, after all, that used to be an old tavern. Its chimney had been sealed decades earlier. A maintenance hatch in the chimney was opened, and that's when they found it, the body of a person. Wedged deep within the brick flue were human remains, skeletal, partially mummified, compressed in a narrow space only about 11 inches across. There were no identifying items, no wallet, and very little clothing remained. Nothing recovered could confirm an identity. And so, the man was quickly nicknamed Chimney Doe. Madison police investigated, but the case immediately ran into complications. To start, the body was badly decomposed. There were no signs of trauma or gunfire visible on the bones, and the position of the remains, arms at the sides, head down, raised questions about why anyone would have entered the chimney voluntarily. But it appeared like that's what might have happened, and this person just got stuck. Investigators estimated he had been there for at least a year, maybe several. Dental records went inconclusive, and DNA testing was still years away from being routine. The coroner then listed the cause and manner of death as undetermined. The body was stored under an unidentified case number and eventually interred without a name. Over time, this story faded from local news. It was really only a blip when it happened to begin with. The old building changed hands, and the legend of the man in the chimney became something talked about on State Street. But it was just one of those strange things that happens in this world, and life eventually moves on. For decades, that's how it stayed, but then, in 2021, the case was reopened by the DNA Doe Project, a volunteer network that applies genetic genealogy to long cold identification cases. Wisconsin authorities submitted degraded DNA from the skeletal remains to a specialized lab, which reconstructed a usable genetic profile. The search from there took years, but by early 2024, a match actually surfaced. The man, once known only as Chimney Doe, was identified as Ronnie Joe Kirk, born in 1942 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He had been 47 years old at the time of his disappearance. Kirk's family told investigators he'd left Oklahoma in the late 80s, possibly hitchhiking north to Wisconsin in search of work, and they simply never heard from him ever again. What exactly happened after he reached Madison remains unknown. The theory most often repeated is that he tried to enter the building from the roof, maybe looking for shelter, but probably attempting to break in, and became trapped inside that chimney. The opening narrowed sharply several feet down, so once wedged, there was no way to move. The space was too tight to breathe properly. When authorities contacted Kirk's surviving relatives in Oklahoma, they were stunned. For more than 30 years, they'd assumed he had simply started a new life somewhere. His brother described him as restless, always moving from job to job, and sometimes leaving for weeks without warning. Madison, it turned out, was just one of many stops that ended suddenly. With his identity restored, Chimney Doe was removed from the Wisconsin Missing Persons Registry. His remains were reburied under his full name. The first time in 35 years, he'd been called anything but Doe. Number 2, the Volkswagen Rabbit.
Police are searching in south central Wisconsin for the remains of an Appleton woman who disappeared in 1992. If the remains of Lori Deppis are found, it would corroborate the confession of convicted kidnapper Larry Dwayne Hall.
It was just after 10 p.m. on August 19th of 1992 when 20-year-old Lori Deppis pulled her gray 1984 Volkswagen Rabbit into the parking lot of her boyfriend's apartment complex in Fox Crossing, Wisconsin. She'd been out with friends at a coffee shop in Appleton earlier that evening. The drive was short, maybe 10 minutes, and she was expected upstairs any minute. But Lori never made it inside. When her boyfriend Brian realized she hadn't come up for several minutes, he went outside to look. Her car was there, parked properly, her purse sitting in the passenger seat. A cup from the coffee shop rested in the console. Nothing was disturbed except for a single faint handprint on the window, smudged as if pressed from the outside. And that was the last physical trace of her. Now, Lori had grown up in Menasha, attended the local high school, and was working part-time at a gift shop while studying graphic design. She kept her life ordered, work, school, family, all moving in neat lines. She called when she said she would and showed up when she was expected. And that's why her sudden disappearance hit so hard. It was most certainly not something she chose to do. And by 10:15, her car sat cooling in that lot, but no one in the area had heard a single thing. There was no yelling or fight, no door slam or tires screeching away. For the investigators, they quickly ruled out robbery. Her wallet and cash were untouched. There was no sign of a struggle, and her car keys were missing, but the car's still there. The parking lot lights were working, and several residents were awake at the time, so you'd think someone would have noticed something. The disappearance felt very clean, but almost too precise, almost as if it was planned. The weeks that followed, police combed the surrounding neighborhoods and nearby woods. Helicopters and dogs covered a radius of miles, but no trace appeared. Lori's family offered a reward, organized searches, and distributed flyers statewide. Despite hundreds of tips coming in, nothing solid ever surfaced. And years later, a new name entered the story. In 2010, a convicted kidnapper from Illinois, Larry Dwayne Hall, confessed to abducting and killing Lori DePease. Hall, who was already serving a life sentence for another crime, claimed he spotted Lori leaving that coffee shop and followed her from there. He said he grabbed her as she stepped out of the car, strangled her, and eventually dumped the body in a wooded area hours away. But Hall's history with confessions was a bit complicated. See, he'd admitted to dozens of killings in the past, many later proven false or even impossible. In Deppie's case, he provided details that matched known facts: the car, the timing, the coffee cup, but there was still no physical evidence. Despite doubts, Hall's confession forced Wisconsin investigators to reopen the case. Forensic teams came in and re-examined the Volkswagen and retested items using newer DNA methods, but the results came back inconclusive. So, other than Larry's confession, there was nothing to point to him or anyone else for that matter having committed the crime. In interviews, Lori's mother Mary described the years as a frozen kind of waiting, the sense that the world kept moving and her life was stuck trying to find answers. As of right now, Lori DePease is still classified as missing and presumed deceased. Hall remains a person of interest, but has never been formally charged. Without a body, prosecutors have no evidence beyond his word, and his word is proven unreliable more than once. In small towns, disappearance stories often grow into folklore, but this one never drifted that far. And for locals, it stayed rooted in that single parking space, a reminder that some mysteries don't happen far away. They happen 20 feet from home, and the time it takes to set down a cup. Number 1. The bus stop. April 3rd, 1996. A Wednesday afternoon in rural Spooner, Wisconsin. 15-year-old Sarah Bushland stepped off her school bus and started up the long gravel driveway toward her house. She was carrying her backpack, chatting briefly with classmates before heading home. The distance from the road to the house was about 500 feet, but somehow she never made it to the front door. And Sarah was a sophomore at Spooner High. Her life, like a lot of teenagers, sat between new independence and the constraints of home. She lived with her mother, stepfather, and 2 older stepbrothers, a quiet wooded area right off Highway 53. On the afternoon that she vanished, the school bus dropped her off around 4 p.m. Several classmates later told investigators they spotted a brown or tan vehicle idling near the end of the driveway, but none of them could say for certain whether Sarah approached it. But of course, that all happened in a short span, and no one was particularly looking out for details in anticipation that a disappearance was just minutes away from happening. When Sarah didn't come home for dinner, her mother initially assumed she'd gone to a nearby friend's house. But by nightfall, when no one had seen her and calls went unanswered, the police were notified. The Washburn County Sheriff's Office launched a missing person investigation within hours. The early search focused on the woods surrounding the Bushland property, thick pine and brush that stretched for miles. Dozens of volunteers combed the area, and nothing turned up. The only thing deputies found was her backpack and a binder near the driveway, as if dropped during the walk in a moment of struggle. It looked like an abduction, but there were no footprints leading away, no tire tracks that could be matched, no confirmed sightings beyond that brief moment near the road where her classmates saw her as the bus drove away. A rumor spread quickly through Spooner, and some pointed to a possible runaway scenario. As Sarah had recently been grounded for skipping school, others mentioned tensions at home. But none of those theories aligned with the evidence, and she'd taken no spare clothes and no money, so in other words, there was no plan. Over the years, the investigation has passed through multiple hands. Detectives have interviewed classmates, ex-boyfriends, and family members. In 2013, the Wisconsin Department of Justice's Cold Case Unit re-examined the file, pulling DNA from old evidence and reviewing new statements. The case remains open, and no one has ever been charged. In 2017, the Sheriff's Office confirmed they had several persons of interest, but declined to name them publicly. They also re-interviewed individuals connected to the family and checked nearby wells and wooded parcels with cadaver dogs. Still nothing. Sarah's case stands out for its smallness, the short distance, the familiar setting, and the total lack of evidence. Each year, her sister and mother mark the anniversary online, reminding people that Sarah would now be in her 40s. The case continues to generate tips, many from people who were teenagers in the area at the time. Investigators have said they believe someone in Spooner knows exactly what happened, but has never come forward. Now, almost 30 years later, the gravel road hasn't changed much. The pines still close in on both sides, and the sound of tires on stone still carries across the fields. On that afternoon in '96, the bus pulled away, leaving Sarah standing at the edge of her world. And in the time it took for the dust to settle, she was gone. And so there were the 5 most dark and mysterious cases from Wisconsin. Hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know if there's any I missed, and if you want your state covered next, throw me some creepy stories and I'll go check them out. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Y'all stay safe out there. I'll see you over in the next one.